Welcome to the Australian Hiker Podcast, Australia's longest running hiking podcast, downloaded over 1.2 million times worldwide and providing you with an Australian perspective on all things hiking. We're your hosts, Tim and Jill Savage, coming to you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country.
In today's episode 340 of the Australian Hiker Podcast, brought to you by Australian Hiker, we catch up with Siobhan, Geoff and Alin on the 1,600-kilometre Via Transilvanica long-distance hiking trail located in modern-day Romania. We hope you enjoy. If you'd like to help support Australian Hiker and this podcast, there are a couple of ways that you can help us out. Firstly, by subscribing on your podcast host of choice so that each episode is available as soon as it's published. And if you have the opportunity, leave us a 5-star review. Another way to support us is go to the Australian Hiker website at www.australianhiker.com.au and click on the Support Us page and buy us a coffee. You can do a one-off donation or become a monthly supporter. All donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue producing this podcast and blog. Now let's get on to today's episode. When you think about Transylvania, the name Dracula comes to mind. But did you know that Transylvania was originally part of Hungary and only incorporated into Romania after World War I? More importantly, Romania is the home to the Via Transilvanica, which was officially launched on the 8th of October 2022 and at that time was 1,400 kilometres in length. But at the time of the interview, the trail now covers 1,600 kilometres in distance. The aim of this trail was to give travellers the chance to discover the various parts of Romania in quite a unique way. Different regions with their histories, people, culture, landmarks and stories. On launching it, it was designed to be the trail that unites. In today's episode, we catch up with Alin, one of the team involved in creating this trail, along with Siobhan and Geoff, two Australian hikers who undertook the walk, to get some different perspectives on what their journey was like. I seem to say this quite regularly, but the more I do these interviews, the more of these trails that end up on my bucket list. But in all honesty, this is one that I can really see myself doing. The more I talk to the three of them through this episode, the more it just sounded like something really amazing and worthwhile doing. Siobhan, Geoff, Alin, thank you for making the time to chat with us.
You're welcome.
And thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being interested in our trail in Transylvania.
No, that's good. Now, first up, Siobhan and Geoff, give us a bit of a background on your hiking experience. What have been your key hikes and what sort of hiking do you like to do?
Okay.
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're both long-distance hikers and we have hiked many long-distance trails around the world. So my first trail was the Appalachian Trail. And since then, before I met Geoff, because we only met in 2021 or 2, before that I'd hiked a lot of years in America. I'd hiked the Arizona Trail, the Long Trail in Vermont. I've hiked the Appalachian Trail twice. My failed hike was the Pacific Crest Trail. I didn't complete that. And apart from that, I'd hiked in Ireland on the Wicklow Way and in Australia, the Bibbulmun Track, Hyson Trail, the usual.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Geoff?
Yeah, Tim, my background, actually I've come to through hiking fairly late and only since retiring in 2017. And prior to that, it was more traditional Australian off-track bushwalking, and I've done that for pretty close to half a century prior. And so my through-hiking resume is Pacific Crest Trail, Continental Divide, Hexatrek, now Via Transilvanica, Arizona Trail. So it's Europe, North America and Australia.
Yeah. So together we hiked the Continental Divide Trail, most of the Hexatrek in France, and we hiked the Arizona Trail together again, and now Via Transilvanica.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Alin, it is Alin, is it?
Yes, Alin, yeah.
Okay. Now, what's your hiking background and what is your connection to the Via Transilvanica Trail?
Okay, I'm not a true hiker. I was 11 years ago to Santiago de Compostela, but that was more a runaway for all what I have to do in that time, and I was a little bit tired, and I want to have the experience. And of course, Via Transilvanica, I made Via Transilvanica 3 times because Via Transilvanica is our long distance trail. And I was last year in 2024, I was in Japan and I made Michinoko Trail. Yes, I have something like 5 or 6,000 kilometer in long distance trail made.
Okay. Now, what's your connection to this trail?
Via Transilvanica was the responsibility. I have the responsibility to make the trail. Everything was in my head 8 years ago. Our organization, True Social, I founded that 25 years ago, was I looking for a project to share the Transylvania beauty and Romanian beauty with the world, because a lot of people, also in Europe, not around the world, have no idea about Romania. And Via Transilvanica was for me the best reason to share the Romanian beauty with the world in this form. But for me, Via Transilvanica is not a touristic project. It's our project to revive the communities along the trail, because the biggest problem what Romanian have in last 10 or 15 years is the all Romanian people are going, especially in west of the Europe, to work. And all the village, all the 1,000 years or more culture are in forget. Everybody forget that. And for me was important to make a project to have again life in these villages. And that was my response to all these problems. But Tălșu Social work a lot with young people, work a lot for environment. We made a lot of social projects, and that is for us, we was very successful and we made it. And Via Transilvanica is already done now, and a lot of people from all the world come to us and to see that.
Okay. Now, I was going to say Transylvanica or Transylvania, that's Romania, is it?
Yes.
Transilvanica is the Latin name for Transylvania. Via Transilvanica is a path for Transylvania. 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire are coming to this part of the world, and she finded that forest without border, and they say Trans and Sylvania, and that two words was the future name for our Transylvania. And for me it was important to give a name that very, very many people around the world know about Transylvania. It's about a story, an Irish story. It's not a Romanian story. It's about a story about Dracula. And Dracula is a very famous vampire, probably the famous one. And many people also in Germany, I lived for many years in Germany, they have no idea about Romania. Between Germany border and Romanian borders are only 800 kilometers, but everybody in Germany has no idea what is in Romania. In Romania, you have a lot of problems, of course. It's many corruption, we have a dictator, we have 50 years communism, we have poor children, poor people, we have a lot of problems, but Romania and Transylvania have not only problems. And for me, it was important to speak about this, but not in the form, don't go away to Transylvania because you are in danger. It's something different to walk a trail because you have the chance to understand a new country, and is the best way to understand a new country. And all this was to do for me in this project, to have a project to speak about our problems, but also to share the beauty of Transylvania and the nature from Transylvania and the 2,000 years culture that you can feel, you can touch this culture. And I am pretty sure that many people from Romania are also here in Australia, and they miss for sure that that country because it's a beautiful country, but also with the problems. And yeah, here is Via Transilvanica. And I have the lucky to meet a lot of people on Via Transilvanica. Siobhan and Geoff are the best example for that. And yeah, I'm happy that in the very, very short time, Via Transilvanica is so famous.
Okay. Now, I was going to say, in putting together a trail that's approximately 1,400 kilometres long, how did you go about it? Was it an easy thing to get a route from one point to another, or did you really have to negotiate with the landowners as you went?
Did you develop it?
Oh, it's from village to village. That was for me the important things to save that life from the villages. And any between 20 and 30 kilometers, you have a village, you have accommodation, you can sleep there, but you can also understand the culture from Transylvania, because Transylvania is a place with many, many cultures. Of a lot of people live there. It's not only Romanian people there, it's also Germans people, but not a type from Germans. Many types from Europe, Germans are in Transylvania for 800 years. Hungarian people, settlers, Jewish people, Romanian, a lot of villages and villages life you can see on this trail. And for us, is from village to village. Also, Transylvania and Romanian have the last primer forest in Europe, for example. In the last 1000 year, you have a special landscape because the people are there. It's not wildness, and it's very nice because all this made unique landscape. And of course, we want to have a trail for forever. And we made a sculpture any kilometer that is very heavy, to 230 kilograms. 81 artists works for that, 4.5 years. And we have not only a trail, we have also very, very long exhibition along this trail. And we have a very good, I think, a very, very good guide. And you have a lot of information in that guide. We prepared our organization. It is in the kilometer 160 from the north to south. And our organization work and develop that all the people have easy to go to this trail, to have all the information, all the safety things, because we have a lot of bears, for example, also in Romania. Any bears, of course, we have a lot of dogs in Romania because the shapers need to protect the farms in the mountain. And all of these we have in the guide. All of these you find in internet very, very quick in viatransylvanica.com. Yes, for us was very nice to have a mixed of nature, very nice landscape, but also with 400 communities that you can meet on the trail.
And we can probably extend on that, Tim, in terms of how Alin developed the trail. It really was about dialogue, and it was him talking to communities along the trail to convince them that this was going to be a good project for them. Would that be fair to say, Alin, that you spoke to these people directly?
It's not only that our organization looking for protect the nature. And the best way to protect the nature is we have something that works every day for us. We plant with our organization, for example, 1 million of trees. Was a very good project. But Via Transilvanica works every day for us because every day somebody come in these villages and looks how beauty is the nature. And the people from these villages understand the nature is something very, very much value. It's not only wood. Via Transilvanica, it's more than a long distance trail for us. It's how we can stay together, understand and protect our country in a form from a dialogue, not only against with each other. I think it's the best form to do that.
Okay. And I'll just have two last questions for you, Alin, and then I'll let you go. How many people have done the track so far? Is it a really busy trail, or is it very few people know it exists?
I am very happy for everybody that is on the trail. Via Transilvanica have now 1,600 kilometers. Is a very big long distance trail, and you can make section. And I think we have more than 100,000 of people on the trail last year, but the most of the people are ongoing for a couple of days or 1 week. We have maybe 200 people that made the true hiking, all the trail. And I need more people on the trail because the sustainability for this trail, it's also with the people together. And for me, everybody that is on the trail, it's a good reason to go to authority to negotiate some better for these people, for the villages, for the forest. And I think 300,000 people on the trail in the year is not a problem. But I am so happy to looking for to find some solution also when the too much people are coming. And yeah, that it's my task in the future. But now we need more people, and I hope with your help or with in any week, Via Transilvanica is in a new newspaper around the world. With this advertising, it is very nice to have more people on the trail.
Okay. Thank you very much. That brings us on to, how did you actually discover this trail and decide you were going to walk it?
Okay, well, I have one Romanian acquaintance in Australia, and she's a rock climber. And so when she'd heard about the trail, because she's from along the trail, she told me about it. And us being through hikers, I put it in the back of my mind. I thought, oh, okay. And then I think I saw maybe a National Geographic article came up online. And I sent it off to Geoff, and we just both immediately said, yeah.
I think 2 weeks later we'd bought our airfare, our air tickets.
Yeah, it just looked really different. And as I say, a place we'd never even thought about. So, yeah, and off we went. And so happy we did.
All right. Now, is this a seasonal trip or can it be done year-round?
Seasonal.
Yeah, seasonal. A lot of hardy Romanians and Europeans will go in the snow and ski along it, etc., but it does get covered in snow, so it really is
as a through hike. It's a shoulder season and summer hike.
Yeah,
the Romanian winter is quite harsh. At Alin's place right now, I believe there's 2 feet of snow.
Yeah. So yes, we, for example, started in August and walked through till late November, I guess, wasn't it?
Yeah, but November was quite walkable. In fact, I would encourage people to think about that, because walking in those broadleaf forests once the leaves have changed colour is it's magic.
Okay, that November's actually, did you finish early November or was it late November?
No, I think we finished late-ish, maybe the 3rd week of November, and we budgeted time to finish in early December, but we ended up, moving a bit faster than we'd anticipated. So, yeah, we finished towards possibly the 3rd or 4th week of November, I think.
All right, and how many weeks or days did it take you all up?
About 80. My advice to anyone now considering the trail is you can go to Romania for 90 days or into the Schengen area for 90 days as an Australian without a visa. So anyone with European passport is obviously not time limited. But as an Australian, 90 days within the borders, we sort of allowed a little bit more than 80 days. We were finished in 80. I would encourage anyone thinking about it to take the longer period and in fact, don't treat it like you would a normal through hike in the sense of...
It's not about making miles.
This one's not about making miles. This one's about soaking in the people. It's the people and the cultures.
The
with landscapes, the architect and some of the
fortified churches,
Yeah.
castles, and you can stay in castles, and
We did.
not expensive stays. They're budget stays, but you do stay in castles, etc. And small towns, and the towns vary. The architecture varies, whether it's a Hungarian town compared to a Romanian, or whether it's Romany or whatever the culture. Yeah, it's just
Okay.
it was quite an experience.
Now, what was the elevation change like on this trail? Was it a quite a broad range of ups and downs, or was it relatively flat? I've got no concept of what the Romanian landscape looks like.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember the numbers on it, but it's got enough ups and downs to be a hilly trail. I think I'm just trying to think, compared to Arizona Trail, it's not as hilly as that. Averages out maybe similarly to PCT, something like it, along those lines. Probably, and it's less than the Hexatree.
And it's not prohibitive, so it's not extreme climbing. You've got your footfall is always on quite good path to walk on. And yes, at the start of the trail and the end of the trail, you've got a bit more elevation, but then you do have plenty of time where you're going over sort of rolling hills, etc., as opposed to up and down mountains.
I think you're probably doing about 700 vertical metres a day, but on some days you might do 1,000 or a little bit more metres.
Or less.
And that's in elevation gain.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
So it's not too bad, exactly.
Vegetation-wise, obviously there's forests, but was it a mix of forests and farmlands and open plains?
Yes. Well, yes to everything.
And also urban environments. So it doesn't shy away from Romania's industrial history, for example. So while largely you're in farmland or forests, you do go into some fairly major towns that are either cultural towns or former industrial towns, and they are incredibly interesting towns. So there's Rashida, and
some of the more interesting places we visited were the urban environments. So Rashida, Siobhan was mentioning, it's this town, it's this urban, it's got blocks of flats and steelworks and allied industries all mixed together in one space. It's like nothing we'd ever seen before. I mean, normally you separate out your heavy industry from where you live. Well, not in Rashida.
Yeah, it was quite incredible, but it also had beauty and history and pride. Romanian people are very proud. And what was very heartening was meeting young people who were very enthusiastic and optimistic about the future of their country. We met a lot of them on trail. We met a lot of them in towns and in cities that had gone there because of the economy of the trail that's now there. The environments, were many and varied, and not all countryside walking.
Okay, that's good. Alin talked about bears. What sort of wildlife is there on this trail?
There's bears.
Did you see any?
We saw the backside of a fleeing young bear, and sadly, but being two of us, we talk and we make twice as much noise, and bears become aware of us before we become aware of them, and so they scamper away.
If you're hiking solo, you'd be more likely to see them.
Alin says he walked the trail up and back, so I guess a yo-yo through two through hikes and a yo-yo, and he saw 7 walking alone. Walking alone. So. And you regularly see bear footprints.
Bear footprints and bear scat on the trail are pretty common sights in some parts, not all parts.
And these are proper big brown bears. Their footprints are way bigger than ours.
Yeah, they're the ones you don't want to meet at night in your tent.
I must admit, I know bears exist all around the world, but you tend to think of bears in the USA or Canada, and I was surprised to find out that bears exist in Japan, and then you look at Europe as well, you think, well, there's no reason why they wouldn't be there, but it's just not something you tend to think of.
Well, Romania has Europe's largest, I think they refer to them as primal forests, and that's bear habitat, so they've got the largest bear population as well.
And apparently it's been quite exploded over the last few years.
It's becoming something that they are looking at managing soon. There's enough of them.
Yeah. So in other wild animals, we saw quite a few foxes, we saw deer, but One of the main things that you need to be aware of on the trail is dogs, because there are a lot of dogs in Romania, and as long as you know how to cope with that, it's fine. So we generally just used to ignore them, and every day you get barked at by dogs, and they might be with shepherds or they might not be with shepherds. So we get barked at every day, and we actually came up with a thing. We used to say dog of the day was the first dog that barked at us in the morning became dog of the day, and you'll get barked at. So basically you ignore the dogs. If that doesn't work and they're sort of starting to annoy you, then you use your voice, and they will generally run away if you yell at them. And then if push comes to shove, you're going to have bear spray with you anyway, so that's your line of defence, I guess.
You use it.
Okay. Were you both using tracking poles?
Yes. Always. We're
Always.
old. We need it for our knees.
Yeah, I use hiking poles for everything. Off-track walking, I've just come back from southwest Tasmania, off-track, and the poles went everywhere.
And they hold our tent up, so when we're sleeping in the tent with them, yep.
No, that's fair enough. Now, from a logistics perspective, how did you go about that? Did you have someone do the planning for you, or did you just use the guidebook and the internet to go through and plan yourself?
Yeah, well, we planned it ourselves. I mean, because we're sort of seasoned through hikers, I guess we're used to planning, or the balance between planning and letting surprises happen. And with this trail, there's 2 apps. So you would have heard of the Far Out app.
Yep.
So there's a Far Out app for it. But there's also the Via Transilvanica organisation has their own app. So there's the 2 apps, and they also have a guidebook that's in English. So we use those to plan. And, I mean, the guidebook goes so far as it will give you the wording in Romanian to text to somebody to say, hey, I'm coming into town. Can I, have you got accommodation and food for me? And then it will tell you, it will say, either respond yes or no. So the person will then respond. So you've got all that in the guidebook. So language is not going to be a major problem. Okay. And, of course, like anywhere without the language, you just pantomime your way through and use Google Translate.
Yeah, I was going to say Google Translate certainly helps a lot these days. While it's good to speak the local language, I'm sure not many people speak Romanian. French is probably a language that's a bit easier to cope with for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, if you have French or German, there's a lot of German speakers along the trail.
And Spanish.
So, people in Europe, they're very clever. We're sort of embarrassing as Australians. We only have one language generally. Yeah. Whereas they might have, 3 or 4 languages. We did have fun with Google Translate in the Hungarian areas because they speak a specific dialect.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting that when we say there are Hungarians in Transylvania, these are Hungarians that got there 900 years ago. And so they're not Hungarians that have ever lived in Hungary. They sort of got there direct. So their Google Translate really deals with their level of Hungarian poorly, which we found out the hard way. And it's the same story too that in the so-called Saxon areas. Those Germans have been there for 800 years, and so they're speaking some ancient form like of old German. And it's also kind of fun when you're moving through those things. You never really know what to expect. And it's just fun discovering. Yeah, it was discovery.
We had one time where we'd sent off the message to say, can we stay? And we'd had the message back from Maria saying, yep, sure, you can stay. And we got to this house and they let us into the yard. But they didn't seem to know why we were there. And we didn't have a common language, and we're sort of saying, no, we're staying here tonight. And after a while, we were not sure that we were actually in the right house. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Griswolds movie where they turn up into the home of people they assume are their relatives, and it's not actually their relatives. So we felt a little bit like that. But then eventually, it must have been 40 minutes or so, the woman who we'd sent the text to arrived, and everything was like, that's why you're here. And we're like, yes. So... But, it was fun. So you get little situations like that are, they're great. They're what makes travel and they're what makes hiking.
I was going to add that, there's at the planning level, that was where your question went, you don't need to overthink it. Yeah, it's good to have a nice idea of what the trail's about and where you're going, and you can use the guides along the way. That's probably where we found them most helpful. And the other thing we used a lot was a Czechoslovakian app called Mapy, M-A-P-Y. It's quite a rich mapping software. and the Via Transilvanica is embedded into it. So it's an orange line inside Mappy, and it kind of does the same job as Google Maps but works offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, from an expense perspective, how expensive is it to fly to Romania, and what's it like for costs on the trail as far as buying food and accommodation?
So it's a standard European airfare. So if you look at, your fare to, your typical $2,000 return sort of fare.
Or it's more.
Or, maybe a little bit more. And you'd fly to Bucharest from Australia and then do a local flight up to Suceava or Iași at the north end of the country. So, I guess our fares are probably 2,300 each, something maybe. Like and then a daily cost, I would say we calculated it at about $50 a day, but that was us staying in a lot of accommodation, which ranged from people's houses to in towns we'd get a hotel or an Airbnb when we just wanted a little break from staying with people. And that included food as well. Yeah. So, and that's, between two of us. So it's,
the summary word is it's cheap. Cheap on trial.
Yeah, it's not like if you were travelling in Australia, for example, it would cost you an awful lot. In France, we found a lot more expensive.
Yeah, France is way more expensive.
So, it's reasonably priced, and, you can camp in your tent for large parts of it. So we did that a little bit, so there's no costs there associated with that. You can shop in, they're called mixed magazines. They're just general stores in small towns to buy your food, and the food is probably a little bit cheaper than in Australia. So, it's not a cost-prohibitive trail, we found.
All right. Now, in relation to, you mentioned tent camping. What are the rules for camping in Romania? Can you camp pretty much anywhere, or are there designated campsites?
It's
a lot of public land.
There's an awful lot of public land, and you can camp in it. What might restrict a lot of people is where that public land is also bear country, and unless you're proficient at
wrestling bears.
At taking the proper food and other hygiene precautions so that the bears aren't attracted to your tent, that tends to keep you in or close to the villages. But then gradually, as the trail unfolded, we found that we were increasingly attracted to the towns because of the social interaction we got from that. That was actually the fun of the trail. Yeah. There are no real hard limitations on tent camping if you want to, other than, just if you're in the bear country, you need to know what you're doing.
Yeah, and anybody that's hiked in America in grizzly country or the
will have those skills.
You'll have those skills to, put your food separate to where you're sleeping, etc., and don't cook at your tent, those sort of things. But I think we camped, so out of, say, 80 nights, I think we camped 20 or something like that.
That is all.
Okay. And then did you actually have a bear bag at all, or a bear vault, or you were just storing the food away from your campsite?
Yeah, we carried bear bags and, So our plan initially, because we didn't know, it was to bag our food and sling it, some distance from our tent.
So we owned Ursacks, they're called, and they're just bear-resistant bags that you hang your food in a tree or whatever away from your tent, some good distance away from your tent. So if a bear does have a go at it, he's not going to follow up with your tent.
Not going to get rewarded.
And not going to get the food.
Okay. Now, how easy was it to actually get to the trailhead? So you've got your flight into Bucharest, you got your flight into the north of the country by the sound of it. How do you end up getting to the trailhead?
Well, there's a train twice a day that can get you there. There's one in the morning and one in the evening. So people would usually fly into a place called Suceava, and from there's a train to Putna, which is the beginning of the trail at the monastery in Putna. We chose to go a little further away to a university town called Iași, and we stayed there for 3 nights just to get ourselves in the time zone, etc. And then got a train, Iași to Suceava. Suceava, we stayed a night and then went to the trail on the morning train. So there is a train directly to there.
It's all very straightforward.
Yeah, and at the other end there's also a train station with a train that runs directly to Bucharest.
All right. In relation to gear, were you carrying your full gear? So you're carrying sleeping bags, tent, the whole lot? Or how are you working that?
Yeah, we went prepared for, I guess, what you might call a more traditional through hike. And I think it's the style of, and so we did. Yeah, we carried all of, we were completely, everything we needed was on our backs.
Yeah. So our tent,
quote
our
the cliche,
sleeping quilt, our cooking equipment, we carry the whole lot.
But you could walk that trail without that stuff, with pretty much just day packs.
Okay. Now that brings it back to food again. How much food were you carrying? Were you just carrying a day or two's worth of food, or were you carrying a bit more than that?
Well, initially, we didn't know what we were doing. I think we packed
way too
four
much.
or 5 days' food, and towards the end there, 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And the supermarket bought food. So pasta and fish. We like throwing in some pesto and olives and things to make it taste nice.
But we ended up eating mostly at people's houses. Throughout the hike, it was just such a rich experience to do that, to eat with local people and to eat the food that they produce on their properties. So the vegetables are exceptional. Look, we are actually vegetarians, but we found it quite difficult to be vegetarian on the trail, because we would turn up at a house and we just really did not want to be the difficult customers, so we would just say, just feed us whatever you'd normally feed us. So we did eat quite a bit of meat for vegetarians in those in those weeks. But, we just sort of feel like you're in a country, they're producing their own food, it's made on their property.
It's worth mentioning the quality of the food is exceptional. Yeah, the tomatoes, I had never tasted tomatoes like that before. Same for cucumbers, and I think the same for pears.
Yeah, it was across the board, and berries and all sorts of fruit. So you really, if you're buying noodles and tuna from the supermarket on this trail, you're really missing out.
You're nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. It's I must admit, I've got a horticulture background, and freshly grown vegetables and fruit is so much better than store-bought. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, you would love this trail.
Yeah, and these guys, they've got really good soil and really good climate, in the growing season, a really good climate.
And not a lot of pesticides and chemicals, so, yeah.
Now, in relation, just going back to gear again, was there anything out of the ordinary you were carrying, or just stock standard hiking gear?
Stock standard. I don't think there was anything.
We're ultralight. Our gear's ultralight, and so it was just stock standard ultralight gear.
Yep, and trail runners, not boots. We're fine.
What sort of sleeping bag were you carrying? Did you go prepared for the worst, or did you have a mid-level sort of sleeping bag?
Yeah, well, we knew we'd be walking into the latter part of the fall, in the shoulder season, so we knew the nights would get a bit cold, and so we have a double quilt. It's a custom quilt made by Tier Gear. In Tasmania, they don't make quilts anymore, but there's other manufacturers who do. So it's a slightly overstuffed -6 rated double quilt, and we also find that a double quilt is tons warmer than the same rating single quilt. So that, coupled with our down puffy jackets, we're warm down to about -10.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
And the other thing, Tim, it's probably worth. Yeah, this walk we used a single skin tent. When we've walked in the US at that sort of time of year, we would have been in a double skin. We took the punt on a single skin tent, and it was fine. It was just fine.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Now, can you go through and describe a typical day on trail from start to finish?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say if there is a typical day, because there was just so much to see. Our typical days, it's just a through hiking day, you just pretty much walk all day. And we were stopping in a lot of different sites in Romania.
Yeah, we would stop way more often, and because we were in people's homes, we didn't necessarily have a hard routine at the start of the day. Like American through hiking, or Australian even, you sort of have the getting up at sunrise or a bit before, and your goal is to make miles, and you sort of the next day is rinse repeat. It was nowhere near as repeatable or standard as that on this trail, because there were so many other variables. And
so you'd often eat breakfast with people in their homes, and by the time you've eaten that and you're getting out on a trail at sort of 9:30, 10 o'clock sometimes, and then we'd walk, and we'd always come across...
And you might come across a monastery, and it's got this gorgeous art on the wall, so you want to stop there and have a look at it. You might be there for an hour, so there's all sorts of distractions. Yeah,
I think some advice to people on this trail is you can't stop at everything. You've really got to got to pick your things. It will take you a lot longer than 3 months if you're going to stop at everything. But Yeah, so for us on this trail, it was basically walking, stopping when there was something interesting. Sometimes if we got into a town, we'd stop at a little shop, a mixed magazine, and either if it was the afternoon, have a beer, or if it was the middle of the day, have a coffee. Yeah, and then during the day, we'd arrange our accommodation for that night. So we'd send off the message to say, well, we think we're going to be here, so can we come and stay? And then we'd turn up and get fed a fabulous dinner and get to talk to some lovely people and get up and do it all again the next day.
And by the sound of it, if you're doing it in roughly 80 days, you're averaging roughly about 20 kilometres a day?
25, I think. 20 to 25, maybe.
Yeah.
20 to 25.
All right.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think we sort of half aimed at 25. We knew at the outset, having been on trail for a few days, that it wasn't going to be the type of through hike where we would make 30 to 40 k's a day. It was much better to
enjoy it.
Yeah, sniff the roses along the way.
Yeah. I think maybe our biggest day was, maybe 35 or something, but that would be an outlier. And then, we might get to a town and if we're in a town, we think, there's a lot to see here, we might stay for 2 nights, or if we're really, really extravagant, we might stay 3 nights, So
Okay. Now, what were the temperatures like at that time? And I know you were there for a reasonable period, 80 days, but what were the temperatures like, sort of the maximums and minimums?
When we started, the days were still quite warm. So a warm day would go to, say, 28 and could be reasonably humid with 28. So, just definitely on the too warm side of comfortable. As the season progressed, the daytime temperatures were just gorgeous. Low maybe mid-20s, and if it was a bit cooler, it might be 18. But perfect weather. And then as the autumn season sort of closed in, your days would go down to 15. Still. And a little bit less than that in November, but still really perfect temperatures for walking, especially up some of the big hills.
Yeah.
Similarly mild. When we started, the nights were pretty warm, and when we finished, I think probably conspicuously we had only a small number of light frosts. That was the sort of cold end of the weather range, but we did get quite frequent rain.
Yeah, and interestingly, our 2 worst rain days were on the day we started and the day we finished. We got absolutely drowned on the day we finished. It was very unpleasant walking. In Transylvania's got this really great mud, and it's the mud that sticks to the bottom of your shoe and makes you sort of 4 inches taller, So our last day was very challenging with extreme rain, which was sort of nice because we were a bit sad to finish, but on that day we were like, perfect. Time to finish.
But it wasn't Scotland.
No. Which rained every day when we hiked in.
Every day until we got to the last week in the northwest there, which is supposed to be the wet, rainy bit, and then the sun just came out.
All right. Now, you've talked about the culture and the people of Romania, but did you come across many other through hikers, or were they mainly people just doing section hikes as you were travelling through?
Mainly section hikes. We came across a few people. We came across a young German guy who was doing a through hike. A few Romanians were doing through hikes, but we met a lot of people doing section hikes. People are really attached to this trail, and they will hike the whole trail, but they'll hike it over a very long period of time. We met a lot of Romanians that were doing that, so they'd come out religiously every weekend and do a new section of trail. But we also met 2 people from New Zealand. They were fun to hike with. They were doing a long section. English people, families from Moldova. Yeah, and Germans. There's always Germans on long-distance hiking trails, and represented on this one too.
Now, what were the highlights of this trip for you?
Well, physically for me, I really, really liked it. Liked the southern section through the mountains, which was the Terra Banatica section and the Terra Romana section. And that was walking through all those beautiful autumn forests up and down into mountains and in small farming settlements where people lived in houses, without car access. And we stayed in we stayed in a lovely little house with people who, they farmed, but they did not have a vehicle. So that tells you how much, how removed some of these places are. So I really liked that. And there was a section of trail which was relatively newly opened when we were there. And we were told we were the first international people to hike the whole trail plus that section. And there was part of that which was also mountains and farms, which started in a place called Sinkanua and went to, and my pronunciation's awful, but Pion Maralu, I think it was called. So for me, those sections were great, as well as the cultural towns we went through. What about yourself, Geoff? What stands out for you?
I think, the standout, it's just the difference to other trails, the fact that it is the social experience was, and the privilege of being invited into people's homes and their sense of hospitality. Yeah, I know it sounds very conceptual and airy-fairy, but that was what I really cherished from it. And I think also perhaps having engaged with those people, seeing the positive effects that the trail was having on villages, that, when you learn some of the histories about the latter years of the Ceausescu era and some of the things that were happening with people, and particularly in the Germans and the Saxon communities, and then the post-revolution exodus, if you like, from those areas, because they could leave Romania, they could leave their rural villages and go to the cities. Just the revitalisation that is happening from the trail, and just meeting the people who were now committing their lives to
living and working on the trail.
Yeah, but preserving the culture side of the villages that they lived in. I mean, one of the standout guys, he lived in his village was a Saxon village, primarily this old German-speaking village. He was Hungarian speaking,
and he was preserving.
So and their enthusiasm for it. I guess I'm going to give you one last thing. Palinka. Part of the hospitality culture is to offer their spirit beverage, which is a distilled from plums. It's
very alcoholic.
Very alcoholic, and it's very delicious, and it never stops at one.
And you literally, when you walk into someone's house, the first thing they will do is offer you a palinka. Yeah. So you have a little palinka shot with them, and that's the introduction to your relationship with them.
Right. Now, what about the other way? Were there any negatives from your perspective?
Look,
well, I'm going to say no. The evidence for that is that we'll probably return to Romania in June.
Yeah, and we've got Alin here. We've built a really strong relationship with the people and the country, I think. And so, no, I think the only sad thing is that it's so far away. That's the only negative for us, is that you got to fly to the other side of the world to get there. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's all.
Yeah, and I guess it's not surprising that we're vague on that answer, because in all of our through hikes, we love just immersing and taking in what that trail has to offer, and we've done exactly the same here with Via. So it's a matter of enjoying what's there rather than perhaps what's not there.
Yeah, and
or having expectations that were unrealistic.
Yeah, go without expectations on any through hike. And through hiking is just such a great way to travel. You might have a bad hour, or you might have some rain or whatever, but, your overall experience is just so positive.
All right. Now, as a generalisation, how did you find Romania, apart from the hiking side of things? How did you find Romania as a tourist destination?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. So we finished up our trail by going to Bucharest and staying there for a few nights. And then I ended up staying on and doing a Romanian course for a couple of weeks, because I was just enjoying living in the city there and getting to know the city. And, just as a tourist destination, it's starting to get pretty popular, I think, and I can see why. It's a good place to travel.
I suspect the viral communication, the nature of communication in the through hiker community tends to be a bit viral. I don't think it'll be very long. There's a very well known international trail,
and it should be. Should be right up there.
Certainly sounds like it. In relation to this walk, who would you recommend it to do? What sort of age, fitness, experience level do you need to have to do this trip?
Well, I think it actually appeals to a very broad range of people, because you've got your young, fit through hikers, they can treat it as a through hike and, do it as, fast times, etc.
But we'd advise them not to.
But, it's long distance hiking is so popular now with such a range of ages and abilities. And I really think that, there's not a lot prohibitive about this. And because you can stay with people, you've got the older demographic. It's well suited.
Yeah. I think
older demographic.
Because even though it's hilly, the hills aren't steep. But you don't have to carry much food. So, I don't think I think this is, if there is such a thing, at the easier end, if you like.
Yeah.
It's certainly not the Continental Divide Trail.
Yeah. And it's very well marked. You've got you're not going to get lost on it. So from that perspective, you've got people that are new to through hiking. It'd be a great first through hike.
Yeah.
You've got people that are experienced through hikers. You're not going to get lost on this trail. So you've got the beauty of those stone markers every kilometre to remind you of where you are. And, people that like art would love this. Or people that love food would find a food destination. There's just a really well thought out, thoroughly researched and implemented trail.
Yeah. Okay, now I have to ask, because you've prompted me and I thought about this before. I'm the sort of person that would want to take 1,600 photos of 1,600 trail markers. Did you take many photos of the trail markers?
I'm hearing you, and yes.
We could just show you our 1,600 photos.
Yeah, go.
There's a lot to photo. And Geoff's an excellent photographer too, so he has a beautiful collection of photos for us to remember that trail by. There's a lot to photograph.
All right, that's good. One final question. Where's your next big trip to?
Well, this is what we're currently tossing around at the moment.
Well, we're going back to Via for a bit, and maybe we'll do some trail extension exploration with Alin. And then we think, at the moment, the top of the list will be to go up into Scandinavia to do one of the longer walks there, probably the one in Norway. And after that, the most likely candidate is we haven't been to
New Zealand.
We haven't done the New Zealand long trail yet, so that's the most likely one for us.
Yeah,
but we're
at least with New Zealand, it's a much quicker and easier flight, and the culture is not that much different. As much as they wouldn't like me saying this.
That's an attraction for us because it allows us to come. We both got parents, and it allows us to come back and keep an eye on them. That's right, make sure they don't get up to too much mischief.
Yeah, and we like the New Zealand trail is a lot more like an American style through hike as well, in terms of going through wilderness, etc. So we really like doing that as well. So it's got that attraction.
Okay, that's good.
But where we won't be going is we won't be going back to America.
No, unfortunately, that's not for us.
That's the sadness. We've got great friends there, but sadly,
I must admit I've got so many trails in America that I want to do, but I think I'll leave it for a while to see where we're heading. Okay, so we've been talking to Siobhan, Geoff and Alin. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us about the Via Transilvanica.
Thanks, Tim. We hope you get to hike it someday.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
So that was our podcast interview on the Via Transilvanica in Romania, 1,600 kilometres. Now, when I first started looking at this trail, I as I always do, I looked at their trail website and it said 1,400 kilometres. That's what it was when it opened in October 2022. It pretty much runs from one side of the country through to the other side, not quite north-south, but it sort of goes from the side of the country to the top of the country, and goes through a range of different environments, through small cities, through towns, through a lot of rural areas, through farmland, through forests. So you were going through lots of different areas and environments through the trip. So it wasn't just 1,600 kilometres of the same thing. There was a bit of a variety.
It sounds like a great way to really learn about the country and the whole range of different living environments and cultures and, all that sort of thing, given it's 1,600 kilometres and B, you're going through so many different local environments.
As I said in the introduction, I find doing these interviews really interesting, and you hear about trails that you've never really heard about before.
If you put this on your bucket list, Tim, really,
And I think there's a lot of trails that I'd like to do, but this is one I definitely would like to do. So
I don't think, well, I don't know. Maybe you will live long enough. I don't know. But this bucket list is huge at the moment.
Well, I reckon I've got about 90 trails left in me. So
I don't think you've got 90 years. I'm not sure how many a year you'd have to do.
That's doing 3 a year. So yeah, it does sound really interesting, and it sounds different as well. So yes, there's lots of interesting trails in the US, but the Europeans are starting to put some really good long distance trails through that are just that little bit different.
Well, I'm hearing more and more about bears on trails. That's something that doesn't attract me whatsoever.
And we'll get on to that in a moment. Now, I did ask the question about how many people hike this trail. Now, not as many, but the number is increasing. But section hikers, there's been about 100,000 people do section hikes. So, it might only be 5 kilometres, 10 kilometres, half the trail, whatever the case may be. So a lot of the locals are going through and doing it, and a lot of the people in nearby countries are coming in and doing sections from time to time as well. So it's one of these sort of things that I'll get into why, but this is very much a unique trail compared to a lot of the others we've discussed. As you would expect in a European country that's been there for centuries, there's a town approximately every 20 to 30 kilometres, so you can basically gear your travel on that sort of distance. Now, Siobhan and Geoff said did their trip in around about 80 days. And, that includes days off and days where they would have done more than that and less than that as well. But it's the sort of thing that if you really wanted to push this and push hard and do 30 to 40 kilometres a day, you could do it a lot quicker than that. But one of the interesting things with this is they said there was just so much to see and do, they weren't trying to rush their way through. The dogs were also an issue. They said there's lots of dogs, but they're basically working dogs. Lots of shepherds, lots of farmers that have dogs looking after their herds of animals. And they did find that they had issues with dogs from time to time, but yelling at them to go away. They did have tracking poles if the dogs were getting a bit close. But certainly that's a thing that you don't necessarily consider on a lot of trails, but dogs were an issue here. When this trail opened in 2022, it was one of the taglines they used was the path that unites. And the concept was to try and reinvigorate the countryside, get people interested back in the culture of the rural areas, which, like most countries, tends to disappear as time goes on. And as part of that, they ended up planting 1 million trees.
Wow, that's a lot of trees.
Yeah, it's a lot of trees. So, yeah, this is one of these sort of things that there was pros in that this helped create work and pride in culture for the country, as well as helping to rejuvenate the environment as well. So they talked about this trail being a social experience for them. Now, by that, they meant that people were really friendly. They knew about the trail. Unlike some areas, they didn't find people doing the trail to be annoying or a nuisance. They were really happy to have them come through and do it and see their country. It's a shoulder season walk. You wouldn't want to necessarily do it in the middle of summer because it will get a bit hot. You wouldn't necessarily want to do it in the middle of winter because snow is an issue. But Geoff and Siobhan did say they did their walk August through to November. And that November surprised me. I thought, that's going to be getting close into winter. But they said it didn't get overly cold in the first part of November. So I don't know if I'd want to be doing it in December, January, but certainly that did surprise me. So that August through to November time seems to be quite good. One of the things that made me want to do this trail is they said there are a lot of primal forests, and by that it means not just forests that have been chopped down and replanted over the years. These are forests that have been there for centuries and have pretty much untouched and were just wild sort of forests. And apparently these forests in Romania are some of the most primal of all the European forests. So that in itself is a good way or good reason to do this trail. They were saying that it's a hilly trail, but it's not a steep trail. And they said it's not really prohibitive. So something like the Hexa track in France, there's some pretty steep ascents and descents.
That's right.
But in this case here, it's not a huge set of ascents and descents. The trail posts a sculptural addition to the trail. So they look like, and I'm not quite sure what the stone was, they look like a granite post about 1 metre in height and probably around about 150 millimetres square or each side. And they had carvings of sculptural carvings in each of these posts. So they're thinking it might also be at 1,600 kilometres, the longest sculptural trail in the world as well, but they couldn't guarantee that one.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, and I did say to Geoff, if it was me, I'd be taking photos of all 1,600 of them.
It would.
And he said, it's by the sound of it, I think that's what he did. Navigation-wise, they said the Far Out app has a trail app for this, but there's also the website as well. So depending on how you want to do this, you can use that, and you can use Mappy, which is what they also use as well. So you can download a GPX file and use that if that's what you wish to do. Cost-wise, they said airfares from Australia through to Bucharest were around about $2,300 each, and their accommodation, they spent about 20 days camping, but they said when they were staying in commercial accommodation or homestays, they were averaging about $50 a day. So it really depends on the experience you want. But if you're staying in town, and getting food at a local eatery, it's probably just as easy to stay in the accommodation. They were saying that the social interaction in towns is quite amazing because people really seem to love their country, love having visitors coming to it, and love talking about it. So they said that was something they hadn't really considered when doing this trip, but they said it was probably one of the highlights of the trip itself.
Oh, that's fantastic, isn't it?
It is. Gear-wise, they said they used a double quilt just over the top of them and a -6 degree quilt, and they said that was fine. They said it wasn't overly cold. It was cool certainly during the nights, particularly towards the end of the trip, but it wasn't freezing. And they said that -6 degree quilt did them quite well, and for days when it was too hot, they could just fold it back over. So I must admit, I prefer to have my own sleeping bag, I think, as does Jill.
I prefer you to have your own sleeping bag too, Tim.
Otherwise, Jill has a habit of sleeping with her hands gripped around the edge of the doona.
Yeah, I end up with stiff fingers.
So, again, it's good to see people using the quilts, but I'd rather have 2 single quilts if that's what we were going to do. So for me, this is one of the most interesting interviews I've done. Really does sound like a unique trail, and I think Europe is starting to produce some very good long-distance trails.
Yeah.
There seem to be more of them being added from year to year, and they realise that people are into doing this and don't necessarily always want to go to the US, which is probably the home of long-distance hiking.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think people in local communities in, perhaps not well thought of countries are starting to really get into this idea that they've got something for the rest of the world to see, and they're making it easy for that to happen.
Now, this trail, there was fundraising done over in the US, and they did, I think it was a GoFundMe or something like that, where people were raising money to help support this trail. And the fact they've planted 1 million trees and put in 1,600 of these posts, which were pretty amazing. Yeah, hasn't been done on the cheap. Yeah, they've tried to make this as unique a trail as they possibly could, and it sounds like they've done a really good job on it. All right. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast on this very interesting and unique trail, Via Transilvanica. That's all for me. Bye for now.
And bye from me.